Hey everybody, Mike here with Legit Kits. I'm here today to talk to you about our kit, Big Hummer. This is a gorgeous, large hummingbird, and there's a lot in here, and I can't wait to show it to you. All right, so this is our Big Hummer kit. And the first thing you're gonna see is this cover. It tells you how many colors are in it and how many pieces make up this kit. Then there's a list of hashtags. So if you want to see how somebody else quilted this or how somebody else made this, you can jump on either Facebook or Instagram or TikTok and look up some of these hashtags to get ideas on how to finish this kit out. Next, we have a pinup page. You know, it's good to set a goal and work toward it, and this is what you're trying to do. So you put this on your design wall and start sewing. Next, we have what we call the color map. The color map shows all the different shades in your quilt, and Legit Kits is made out of 7.5 by 10 inch blocks. So this shows each block in the process. We do those 7.5 by 10 inch blocks to make it easier to sew these things, so you're not having to push an entire quilt through the throat of your sewing machine as you're piecing it. One of these guides is the pattern side and the other is the finished quilt, because you sew to the back of your pattern when you're doing FPP. So you're going to be sewing in this orientation and your quilt is going to look like this. Now if you want to just do a pattern, we have those available for you as well if you've got a giant stash. We list every color for your quilt in gradient order, and all you have to do is take your fabric and scroll down here and go, okay, well that looks like sassy pink. I'm going to call that fabric PJ and put it in the stack, alphabetize it, and then you're good to go. This also gives you a list of all those colors. There's also a list of the fabrics by the code. So you're going to put your fabrics in these alphabetical order based on these color codes. And that way, it's going to be easy to find those shades as you come across them in the pattern, because the pattern is labeled with these one letter and 2 letter codes. This is a way to check and make sure you have all your fabrics and then they're in the right order before you start. The next part is the assembly guide. Legit Kits has no Y seams anywhere. And to eliminate Y seams, we sometimes have to take those blocks and break them up. So you sew the block fragments first, and then you will piece them together into the finished block. There are written instructions on this side and then a pictorial representation of how that block goes together. And after the assembly guide, we have the cut guide. Now this is a cut guide, not a cut template. And the difference between a cut guide and a cut template is a guide just gives you an idea of the pieces in the fabric. You don't have to cut these out just like this, but this just shows you, you need to save a certain hunk for this particular piece. And it even tells you where that is. This is in block D6, and it's part Q, and it's the first part of part Q. And this is a guide, not a template, because a lot of other quilts are made out of the same repeated triangle or shape, and so you cut out a whole bunch of those. We can't do that here because sometimes our cut guide has to represent 3 yards of fabric, and that's just too much paper to be practical. So you cut off the pattern, not off the guide. Next, we'll go from the cut guide to the pattern itself. This is printed on foundation paper. It is a newsprint style paper. It's easy to work with. What you're going to do is you're going to cut out these pieces of the pattern. You're going to leave this gray on here because this is the seam allowance. And then here you are on A1, you're going to sew color HT to color OM, 1 to 2. And you'll have thumbed through your fabric because you have H's above your O's. And then you pull those 2 out, sew along this line, and then trim it to fit this block, and then go on to the next part. So there's 1 seam on this, 1 seam on this, and it can get busy depending on the level of detail. Once you sew all your pattern pages, then you're going to assemble it into the final quilt. Once you finish sewing all those pattern pages, you're going to combine them into the quilt. And here's where that color map comes in. So this is block G8. There is G. There is G. There is 8. And that is this block right here. So you're going to sew this to G7 and then assemble them all together into your finished quilt top. And then we also have a set of instructions that goes over everything I just said. And it talks about the details in our patterns. So there's a lot of information. And then there's also a guide that tells you how to assemble your quilt using the fewest number of seams possible. And at the end of the paperwork part of Legit Kits, you have a few fun things. You have a card that says, "Don't panic." And this has a very short list that's a quick start guide. You don't have to use all the paperwork if you're not that kind of person. If you are that kind of person who's detail-oriented, we have it all there for you. So this is for the people kind of like me who don't like to read instructions that much. This gives you the guide to get this started, tells you to alphabetize your fabrics, and tells you to just start sewing. You also get a couple of stickers for Legit Kits for your sewing machine. And you get a refrigerator magnet as a way to remind yourself of the project. Now for the fun part, all the fabric. Legit Kits ships a huge amount of fabric with every project because we want you to finish these things. We give you about twice the amount of fabric that you actually need to make the quilt so you can cut big and cut once. Now, don't worry about it. A lot of people, especially when they're starting out with Legit Kits, they're worried they're not going to have enough fabric. We give you plenty and we have an enough fabric guarantee. If you run out of any of these colors, you send us an email and we will send you replacement fabric at no extra charge because we want you to finish these things. Because when you do this, you're going to show it to everybody you know and they are going to come see us. And that is just good business all around. You can find Big Hummer and all of our other quilt kits on lyndas.com. Thanks for watching and stay legit.